I'm just gonna be like,
All right, we're live. Hi, Lauren.
amazing. Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Caffeinated Change slash a the seed conversation. For those of you who are new to these conversations, new to my page, new to New Room, new to Lauren, or maybe you saw Lauren's post about this. We're here today to have a conversation about the concept of rooting into our identities and how our identities play a role, or our exploration of our identities play a role in the way that we can engage in social change and systemic change. This is all inspired by the new program that Danny and I just released, called The Seed. This,
Exciting.
yeah, it is exciting. The Seed is a 5-week long interactive learning experience that we are hosting in cohort style learning. And our first cohort is running from January 22nd to February 22nd. You can find out details about this program at jointheseed.online. And it's a program that is centered around the concepts of ideas, inclusion, diversity, equity, access, and social impact. And the way that we've tried to explore these concepts is through a very personal lens, through a collaborative lens. We want to meet folks where they are, and we've done our best to design this program in a way so that people could feel a sense of agency and power as they moved through it. So in our efforts to let people know about the Seed, we're bringing on some of the key collaborators who've contributed to making it what it is. And Lauren Russ-Constant is one of these folks. We are extremely, extremely honored to have her as one of our facilitators for the cohort in January. And Lauren actually just went through the pilot version of the program. And yeah, so do you want to start, Lauren, by letting us know who you are, the basic kind of like, what do you do? I know you don't love that question of like how you describe yourself, but hey, Roxy. I don't know if you can see the comments coming in,
I
Lauren.
can. Good morning.
So Roxanne is my best friend, and also
Amazing.
we've mutually supported each other's entrepreneurial journeys and consulting businesses throughout our many, many years of figuring it out and figuring ourselves out. So
I love that.
happy to have you here, Rox. So Lauren, hi, welcome.
Yes. Hi, welcome. I'm so honored to be here today, but also a part of the Seed. Again, I'm biased, but that week that we went through doing the kind of beta version, just I'm still thinking about it. I'm still thinking about it, and I'm sure a lot of it is going to end up kind of flowing into our conversation today because I mean it's all connected. So hi, I'm Lauren. Yeah, Erin alluded to, I think there's something really fun with being able to play, and I'm starting to do it. And it's something, again, I think you and Danny do really well, but really play with how I answer that question. So, especially in business contexts. So, I'm Lauren. I'm a big fan of coffee. I am a space holder. We were talking about it earlier. I'm an overthinker. I'm an avid learner. I love learning. I'm an ambivert, so I fall in between that introvert, extrovert, kind of somewhere in the middle. I'm exploring identity. I think I always will be. And I am the founder of a company called Selfhood, which is opening up how we think, talk about, and experience who we are.
Oh, beautiful. I love that. I love that. So before we get into kind of some of our meatier questions, we're starting with a concept which you've moved through with us before. We're going to talk about what our flume of awe has been at the moment, and this opening question of what is your flume of awe is inspired by Adrienne Marie Brown and her sister, whose name escapes me right now. Whenever I'm under pressure, I forget people's names. Adrienne so many amazing things, constantly talking about Adrienne. We are constantly talking about Adrienne. She's a social activist, an author, a poet, studies systems thinking and systems change, specifically as it relates to social movements and how we shift in societies. And Adrienne and her sister have this beautiful podcast called How to Survive the End of the World. And they always start their episodes with, what is your flume of awe? What is your most recent flume of awe? So something that's brought you that sense of wonder and awe.
I love that phrase. I love this question. I think you can see my face already change, and I have to try and, well, I don't actually. So I've been deep in a rabbit hole recently, building something really exciting for selfhood. So thinking about selfhood in the workplace, which is something that, in true transparency, initially I wasn't sure about, but I found the thing and I'm so excited. So I've been researching identity integration and learning more about that. So the idea of how much we can bring together the different parts of who we are and have them feel integrated, have them feel connected, even if perhaps they seemingly aren't within the external world, and the power that brings. And I find it so interesting because from a business perspective, there's loads of research that shows it's super beneficial for companies from an innovation perspective and whatnot. But from a personal perspective, it just really talks to my own lived experience of how I've been trying to, my whole life, juggle that, and how I've been trying to make space and figure out how my different identities intersect and how they work together, and moving away from feeling like I have to be this or that, and being able to find peace and strength and power in like coexisting and letting them all be what makes me really special. So to find research and stuff talking about this, and then me thinking about bringing an offering to the world that actually supports people with increasing identity integration, it's been, yeah, I'm deep in my like nerdy research holes these last couple of days, and like I love it.
Yeah. And I hope that you're also experiencing some flumes of awe about the wonder and awe of all the integration, or the integration of all your identity pieces, as well as the awe at exploring this research, but just, the awe of better understanding and recognizing the inherent beauty and wonder of you.
100%. It's like I'm reading this and I'm reading it with past versions of myself as well. And like it's so interesting and wonderful being able to sit and always have conversations with those versions of myself and feel of where I'm at now and how I feel now. And the research just validates. Like I always go with lived experience first, but it's always nice being able to find language that helps explain something that felt so personal. But yeah, so I go through different seasons. Sometimes I'm really doing an inner work, which I also absolutely adore. And then sometimes I get just really into like learning and absorbing. And then it's thinking about how do I bring it to the world in a softer, creative, like nice way.
Yeah. In a digestible way.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. My flume of awe, I could talk about the fact that I went on a road trip with my 4-year-old nephew, and it was his first sleepover road trip without his parents. It went really, really well. He had a good time. And we went to a Santa Claus parade, so he got to see Santa, which was like...
Oh my gosh. I can only imagine the joy.
I can get over it. I was laughing for like 2 hours straight. He was just bopping around to all the music, all the sound, waving at everybody. It was so cute. But also, I definitely had a flume of awe last week because we're doing a program through Beloved Economies. Are you doing the class?
No, I don't think I am.
Okay, so it's a 3-part class that Beloved Economies is offering, and Beloved Economies is a research group, a book, an approach to understanding how we can transform work towards beloved economies. So the current economy we live and work within they consider the loveless economy, an economy based on progress, profit, and understanding resource, essentially, or not understanding resource and overusing resource. And their research is focused on understanding how we can build companies that actually don't just sustain, but actually encourage the thriving of all of the different folks and flora and fauna that are impacted by these businesses. And so they call this the beloved economy. And there are 7 practices of the beloved economy. So New Room is doing this program right now, the Beloved Economy program. And session 2 was about how we actually begin to shift the economy. And, you know, it's already been 5, or it's only been 10 minutes that we've been live, and I'm going to say Adrienne Marie Brown's name because Adrienne actually spoke.
She's like the third secret member of this conversation always.
We're going to have to get consent for her engagement at some point. So she spoke, and also Eric Weiss, who wrote The Lean Startup. And the parallel between these two and what they had to say about how we shift the economy was fascinating, because Adrienne approaches this from a much more kind of social justice, collective liberation, you know, community-based lens. Whereas Eric, I mean, at least the way I had interpreted him, was very much as, you know, a developer, a tech background, understanding how to build tech startups. And Eric was there actually to speak about the notion of the LTSE, which is a long-term stock exchange that he either founded or was fundamental in creating. And the long-term stock exchange is based on what he found to be true through his work, which was that organizations that focus on long-term gain do better, or long-term thrivable, sustainable success do better over the long term. Not those who are hustling and grinding for short-term profit. And his belief on how we change the economy is that we need to not attempt to change it from the inside, but actually build secondary and tertiary systems, which we then gather around and meet within and begin to utilize more. Adrienne, I don't even know if Adrienne heard what Eric had to say, because I think she had some tech issues before she came on. But then she came in and said, you know, the systems that we're working within, living within, they're collapsing from underneath us. And we need to be thinking right now about how we support folks who are going to fall out from underneath these systems. So she talked a lot about mutual aid. She talked a lot about resource redistribution. She talked a lot about the notion of our personal economy. So if we want to shift the greater economy, we need to be thinking about what is my personal economy, which I absolutely loved. Not just through a lens of, you know, it's inspiring to think about, and it's hopeful to think about where we have personal impact, but also fundamentally it is true that if we begin to shift our personal actions, we shift the greater collective as well, because we perpetuate the larger systems through our daily actions. So
100%. I was going to ask you to clarify what was meant when they said personal economy, but was it really that link back to personal agency?
She said, you know, like where, you know, being in a much closer relationship with your money. Who are you actually giving your money to? How are you protesting and boycotting through the way you're spending your money? Who are you actively supporting? If there are folks around you who need support, how are you redistributing your funds in that direction? Essentially just being much more thoughtful about how we spend.
And
recognizing the power that we have.
So
I love that. I've been, you know, even in the midst of the Santa Claus parade, I was still thinking about our personal economy, you know? Anywho.
That sounds wonderful. You'll definitely have to send me the link to this, because I will.
So diving in, 15 minutes into our live.
Of course.
Why is understanding who we are so important?
There's so many ways I could go with this question. I think I'll start. This might sound like a bit of a paradox, but I think, and this is the work I'm doing, is I'm perpetually exploring this work and this concept of self and identity, and there is no one fixed definition I'm trying to get to. I'm constantly unraveling this understanding. So you're in this with me as I'm working through this, but I feel like the more we understand who we are, the more we understand things like self and identity and where labels come from and how they get prescribed, the more we can free ourselves from it. So it might sound a little bit paradoxical because it's like to learn to release. But I feel like for me, ever since I've been actively and intentionally looking into this work and trying to unpack identity and understand why I feel the way I feel and how I move in different rooms, it's been giving me a sense of power and a sense of freedom and a sense of agency, because I am more aware and I'm more intentional. And again, similar to what we were talking about in terms of personal economy, it you just feel, you realize the agency that you have, you realize the part that you play in this bigger, larger whole. And so I think that's like the bigger, more philosophical answer. And then I think it kind of almost in my head, I think very visually, there's almost then the personal day-to-day experience and I think benefit of knowing who you are. And then there's also the collective. And so personally, I feel that on a really personal level, understanding who you are, knowing, having respect for and understanding of your past experiences, the environment in which you grew up in, the environment in which you live in, what you want, what feels good, really can help you build a deeper sense of connection to self. So again, very personally, I've definitely been a person that was on the rabbit wheel of, oh, I need to do this and I need to do this and I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And then reaching a point and doing those things and being like, this actually doesn't feel good for me, because I didn't once stop to think, did I choose this or am I just doing what I've kind of been told? And so for me, there's been a real power that's come with me sitting with myself and learning myself and really getting clear on how I want to show up in the world in this season of life, and the acknowledgement that that may continually change, which is wonderful and beautiful. But there's just something so nice about feeling like I am in relationship with myself, but then how that connects to the greater whole of being aware of the impact and the power you have on the collective and how you can make other people feel and how you can show up for other people and how you can be with other people. And I think for me, it really comes back to that piece of intentionality. And for me, a lot of that work has come through this idea of understanding self and understanding identity and understanding the communities I'm a part of and the communities and the spaces I want to give back to and cultivate stronger relationships with.
I love this. I feel like the word identity is something that's been very important for me throughout my career. And I also explored a lot through this lens of first our relationship with our identity, our identities, and also how our relationship with ourselves shifts our relationship with other people and allows us to show up more honestly, or allows us to set stronger boundaries, or allows us to be more clear on what spaces we want to be in. And it also allows us to create a lot more, or have a much stronger sense of compassion for other people as they navigate their own relationship with themselves. And in my journey of exploring identity, I realized like just how much I actually don't know about myself, and therefore how much I don't know about other people, because so many of the parts that I held true about me didn't actually come from me.
Yeah.
Again, in understanding yourself, you recognize how much of your definition of yourself was prescribed and defined by other people. So in the recognition of that, like there's a big sigh of relief about the fact that we are so much more in flux and nuanced
than
the labels that we've been carrying. And
I love that.
Yeah, transitioning into like how that recognition that we are so much larger than or so much more than our labels, and also that so many of our labels have been given to us by other people.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the impact is of expanding your relationship with yourself, better understanding your identity, your identities, and how that connects to your capacity and your ability to do what we call ideas work, this diversity, equity, access, social impact work?
That's a really good question. Again, it's like my head has got like, there's so many ways I could go. And that is the thing about self and identity as a conversation. And I think why it's sometimes avoided is because it's so abstract, it's so big, it's everything and nothing at the same. It's just such an interesting conversation. You can see my head live doing that to think of a concise answer.
To be concise.
Okay.
I won't hold you to it. You can answer this one and answer it completely differently tomorrow, I promise.
I probably will. So there's two things floating around my head. I think there's something so powerful about reminding yourself of the power and the agency that you have as an individual, especially when thinking about big work and especially when thinking about things like systems that can feel very big and very abstract. And people can fall into that trap of thinking, what can I, one individual, do to change this? But I think the work of understanding yourself and exploring yourself reminds you, like, in a way, we internally have all of that within us. And we can start to dismantle that within us first and foremost. And then by doing that, we can start doing it in the communities of practice and the communities around us. And then there's this kind of ripple effect, which I think is so beautiful. So there's this power that comes when you start doing, I guess, some, like, whatever the work looks like to you, but you start sitting with yourself and exploring and questioning. It's in that you start to realize, as you said, Erin, like some of the things that you've taken on that are part of those systems, and how we, without realizing it, uphold those systems. And by doing that work and that exploring and that inquiry, we can start to dismantle it within ourselves. And then that in itself is helping take down some of the bigger systems and the conversations we have with people. So there's this idea, and I think the seed so beautifully does this, of like, in my head, again, being visual, it's almost like, it's like starts with the seed of the individual, and then it gets really, really big when we start thinking about systems and those bigger things at play. And then it almost grounds back in the individual of like, it's like starting with yourself, learning and being able to get that bigger picture and thinking about the bigger things. And then again, coming back to how it changes how you are in your everyday with the people that you're around. Mm-hmm. So there's that piece. And then the other thing that comes to me is belonging. So funnily, the thing that brought me to my own personal exploration and interest in identity was this concept of belonging. And from a very personal perspective, not realizing until I heard about the word belonging and I looked into it, that a lot of my life really struggled to feel that sense of belonging, which is often why I ended up giving a lot of my agency away, because I was so desperately trying to fit in and because I didn't feel like I belonged. But then I think I shared with you the thing that really shifted it for me was a response Maya Angelou gave about belonging. When you truly belong somewhere, you belong nowhere and everywhere.
Right.
And the price is high and the reward is great. And for me, what I internalized that to mean was that I need to belong to myself first and foremost. I need to figure out, how do I know myself, like myself, belong to myself, where I can simultaneously belong in almost every group I'm in because I'm so deeply being myself, and also belong nowhere because I'm good and I know myself. But I think that is also the same when we think about collective belonging and driving towards creating cultures where everyone feels a sense of belonging. For me, I think we need to know how to belong to ourselves first, to know what it feels like to belong to other people. Almost that feeling of like, how, and I talk about this sometimes with the work I do, it's like, how are you seen by someone else if you can't first see yourself? Right? It's almost that feeling of like knowing what it feels like to be seen, because you know what it feels like to be authentic in that moment, whatever that looks and feels like. So there's the piece around the individual agency and the fact that almost you can do the micro work within yourself first, and it will help you do the greater work. And then there's also this really powerful piece about belonging and that feeling that I just like I want everyone to have, and the fact that we can give it to ourselves and then we can give it to others and we can be given it by others, and that relationship as well.
Right. That's so beautifully said. It's so beautifully said. And I there's so much that I want to say. On the notion of how we show ourselves first, that sense of belonging, in order to learn how to better create that belonging for other people. When we talk about the concept of belonging, it feels like this like intangible, atmospheric sort of thing, when in reality, belonging is nurtured and created intentionally through practices, through active practices of engaging in respectful dialogue and demonstrating care and inviting other people to exercise power and to have choice. And so when I think about, and I've thought about this a lot, and I've actually spoken about it on LinkedIn in the past, but it's something that continues to come up for me. When I think about what it looks like for me to give myself a sense of belonging, or at least to nurture that feeling of like, you are okay as you are, it looks less like, self-care, kind of like, and it looks a lot more like being kind to myself when I don't have the answer, and recognizing that I'm constantly learning as I go, giving myself space to change my mind, to have ever evolving kind of boundaries, and creating more space to recognize what my actual needs are, and therefore means like practicing actually listening in. And I'm going to try not to go too long on a piece about this, but I feel like you'll have something to say about it. So my ability to meet myself in those ways has been greatly, greatly impacted by my commitment to therapy over the last many years. Like I've consistently practiced maybe 7 years or so. And what I learned in therapy about myself is that I don't have the answers. It's okay to ask questions. There is no standard I'm supposed to be holding myself to. And I see a direct correlation between recognizing those things and the increasing ability that I have to engage in the difficult conversations and the learning that comes with committing to ideas work, with committing to social change, with committing to collective liberation, because so much of that work for everyone, but I'll speak for myself, and I'll speak more so for white folks, like so much of that work is connected to our ability to hold a mirror up to ourselves and to recognize where these values of dominance or supremacy, or what Tima Okun calls the characteristics of white supremacy culture, how those actually shape my own relationship with myself, and therefore prevent me from engaging in learning and engaging in ways. So some of those characteristics are perfectionism, or thinking that there's only one right way, or being, prioritizing objective versus subjective, or objective versus emotional thought. And as I've learned more and more about these characteristics of supremacy, I realize how much they've been ingrained in my life. They've been ingrained in me, my relationship to myself, and they have They get in the way of learning new things. They get in the way of hearing other folks. They get in the way of recognizing multiple perspectives. And like, just on the notion of perfectionism, they get in the way of me having compassion for myself as I learn new ways of being in society.
I love that you said that. And I've had a very similar journey. I think in terms of how I think about belonging to myself, it's been truly a lot of unlearning. It's not necessarily about doing more, it's about releasing. And I was thinking about those white supremacy characteristics. And again, it's something that during our time in the seed, I really was sitting with. And you're so right. It's unlearning some of those things that perhaps stop or make it harder for our humanness to be human to human. And I think about, it kind of comes back to the first thing I said about identity, which is, again, being able to sit with the nuance and the dissonance and the paradox. Is that I've found that the more I learn about this stuff, the more I learn about identities and I learn about labels and I learn about myself, the easier it is for me to release it.
Yes.
And I think that's what's so powerful in this work. And I think sometimes, and again, I can speak for myself, I won't speak for others, but if there is resistance to this work, sometimes it can be because it shakes a sense of self, or people feel like they're being attacked because they have these identities that they hold so tightly. And when you talk about things like white supremacy, a lot of people can have very stark reactions because it feels like you are attacking me. And I think the more I learn about identity and the work and the world and the community and the collective, the more I'm able to release labels and be fluid and be complex. And so I can hold space for uncomfortable stuff because it's not feeling so personal. It's feeling like there's just so much at play. So belonging to myself has been almost starting to take off some of those identities and some of those labels and just letting myself be fluid and just honoring where I'm at in the moment, even if that's not perfect. And I think that for me has been belonging, whereas previously I was doing a lot of fitting in. I was trying to be perfect. I wouldn't speak unless I knew it was going to be right, and that was like more of a cage for me. So yeah, I love what you said about like the role of therapy and introspection and releasing some of those characteristics that perhaps stop us from just being who we are and existing as humans.
I'm trying to think about how to word this question, because it's kind of just like thoughts that are flowing around in my head right now, because there's this conversation is called Rooting in Identity. And there's a piece that we've been talking about right now, which is about creating more space for you as you are, honoring who you are as you are, creating that sense of belonging for yourself. There's also the conversation here about how we honor, recognize, respect, acknowledge other folks' identities, the intersection of those identities, and how we become better, not better, how we recognize the interlocking and intersecting ways that the systems impact certain folks more, oppress certain folks more, and therefore privilege and empower other folks more. And I don't even know how to ask, I don't even know if there's a question here. How do we root in our own identity? Maybe it's not a how. Sure, maybe it's a how. How do we root in our own identity and also recognize and honor the rooting of other people's identities as well?
I love that. So this is the first thing coming to mind. I'm just going to trust what comes. It's not necessarily answering the how, but just a reaction I had was, I think the more you learn and you find peace with your journey of rooting into your own identity, the more you're able to give that same peace and compassion to other people doing that same thing. So I think there's just the act of you doing it yourself as an individual, I think, means that the way that you then look at others, there's more compassion there, which I think is really powerful and important in itself. I also think that permission is a huge thing for me on my journey. So seeing other people just live and be messy and not perfect and human and honest and kind gives me permission to do the same. So it's like this thing of like, almost there is this power that when you decide to just show up as you are, and you decide to be, again, authentic to where you are in that moment and what you want to show up as, you give other people permission to do the same. And it's like, especially, you don't always see the things, like you can feel these things, but I think sometimes when you see other people doing it, it's like, okay, cool, it's not just me and I'm going to do it. And that in itself creates a really lovely snowball effect. So there's something that comes from just like, when you do the work, there is just a compassion and an awareness and a knowledge of your own journey. And so you're able to give that to other people on their journey, because you're like, oh, I get it. Like, I've been on my own. Like, and then I also think there's something about when you do it, you also then give people permission when they see you doing it and talking about it. And I think just conversations like this, like, I think identity and self and rooting into our identities isn't something that has been spoken about a lot. And again, my whole thing is like, why do they not teach this in schools? Like, why do we not give them the language to, because who we are and our identities and how we show up in the world is so instrumental to how we show up in the world. And it's not about telling people how or what, it's just about creating spaces where people can start to discuss and explore and experiment. And I think that is so powerful in itself. This, again, it's moving away from this right or wrong, and just the ability to just play and dance and learn. I don't think I've answered your question yet, but I feel like I'm getting to it. So it was how.
I don't know. How do we root into our own identity while also creating space for other people to root into theirs, or to recognize the honor in other people rooting into theirs? Or
so, okay, two things. So again, it comes back to that belonging piece, right? Which is how I think, like, when I belong to myself and I deeply am rooted in myself, whatever that looks and feels like, and then I go into another space with other people, I don't need to try and change them, or I'm not trying to make them conform to me, or I'm not trying to conform to them, because I'm like, I can appreciate and love where I'm at and who I am, and therefore I can do the same for you, because we don't need to merge. We can just exist and belong together in our individual belonging, which I think is so wonderful. So I think there's that power as well, is like, when you've just got yourself and you're comfortable with yourself and you're open, I think there's less need to control and try and change or shape people into needing to be the same as you, because you're like, I'm good. And then I think there's another thing as well. I think it's also intent. This is a digression, but it's something I believe in. Intentionally putting yourself in spaces of people that are different from you. I think sometimes a lot of the tension and discomfort can come when people are very used to being around people that are very similar, and then all of a sudden they're around people that aren't. And for me, I've learned so much about myself by being in different rooms with different people with different identities that make me see parts of myself that perhaps I didn't realize I had, and being able to find those similarities and being able to sit with the differences. And I think for me, that's just been like an amazing practice. And I think the more people do that, the more we realize that difference can be difference, and we don't need to make it's just wonderful as it is. And you can still find those threads of commonality and similarity. And it doesn't need to be sameness or difference. It's like, you can just exist in this. I don't know. I'm rambling now, but
no.
Probably in like an hour's time, I'll be like, oh, I've got the exact question. But,
feel free at that point to add it as a comment.
It's just there's no one wrong, right way. It's just this like interesting thing.
I hear everything that you're saying, and in many ways I agree with it. And I think there's also an idealistic sort of lens to that notion that, like, I love it. This is what I believe in as well. It's like, let's play together. I'll be me. And the more I'm me, the more you are you. And the other thing that comes to mind for me, and as I was listening to you, I was thinking about like, you know, I promise you I was listening and I was multitasking and thinking, how would I be answering this question? Because it's a difficult one. And I think the more I root into my own identity, the more I recognize where the power dynamics lie, the inherent power dynamics. And you know, because you've seen some of our content, but you know, we start by introducing ourselves with like a series of words that we use to describe who we are. And over the years, I've shifted those words, and it's like artist, change advocate, hippie, settler on indigenous land. And there's all these different phrases that I use to describe who I am. And then Danny shares hers. And one that isn't on that list, but more and more I feel needs to be on that list, is my identity as a white person. Because in some ways, like, my race as a white person feels like, you know, like it's non-existent, or it has felt like it's non-existent. And the more I become aware of the power dynamics and the more I dig into this work, the more I realize that that notion that whiteness is non-existent and is kind of like the base is a white supremacy sort of concept. And so with my whiteness, as I'm dismantling the systems, or as I'm working towards dismantling the systems of oppression, rooting into my own identity inherently has to be connected to me recognizing where there are power dynamics at play that I'm not maybe consciously aware of. And it's not just about my whiteness. There's so many different layers of my privilege that the more I become aware of them, the more I become aware of the fact that, you know, there is if I am gaining from this thing, it is because someone else is losing. So if I am gaining from the fact that, you know, I don't even like, you know, my education level, access to resources, my whiteness, you know, my able-bodiedness, like if I'm gaining from these things, it's because societally we've understood that on the other end of that spectrum, that there's someone who's paying. And so anyways, for me, this exploration of digging into the different facets of my identity, there is a beautiful aspect to that, which is like, I create space for myself, for the fact that I'm in flux, for the fact that I'm learning, for the fact that I have this, like, all these inner child wounds, as we all do. And that creates space for more honest and safe and hopefully like compassionate conversations and spaces with other people. And recognizing all these things about myself also inherently means I have to recognize where my privilege lies, where I have access to power. And I think a lot about responsibility, the responsibility that comes with that. How I'm using my voice, my platform, my intellect, my access.
I love that. No, I'm so glad you took it there as well, because it's true. There's so much there is so many ands in this conversation and in the work. And I think speaking more openly about privilege is really important, because again, it's like, I think it can be something that people have a very extreme reaction to and shy away from. And it is a heavy word, but it's the acknowledgement that, like, I'm thinking about my privilege, you know, and being a woman of color and being in equity deserving groups, but also acknowledging, like, I am able-bodied, I got a degree, I speak English, and being able 100% being able to see those parts too and see that whole. And then it's thinking about, to your point, it's like, okay, so what do I do with this? How do I support others? How do I give back? And again, I think it still just comes back to like the value of exploring this and learning these things about yourself, and not being like, I'm not reactive with this. It's like, this is true. Like, these things are parts of me, and it's now, what do I do with that? And how do I move in a way that feels good for me, that is cognizant of that? And yeah, again, thinking about the larger and my role and how I move within that.
I think that whole practice of not being reactive when you realize these things, and as you're doing the work of exploring who you are, I think that's really a practice of developing self-love, not moving from a place of shame, moving from a place of care.
Mm-hmm.
And I love talking about love on LinkedIn because
yeah, love on LinkedIn, that could be like a whole series in itself.
I think it's so important that we recognize just how rich and deep the emotions are that are connected to doing meaningful work and creating safe spaces around us and meaningfully engaging in conversations with folks. Like, this all requires us to lean into some really big emotions, including love, including care, including joy. It needs to be a pleasurable experience. And also it needs to be one where we recognize, like, there will be a lot of discomfort, there will be fear, there will be uncertainty, there will be unease. Yeah, we need more space for all of these big feelings.
For sure.
Transitioning us or shifting into kind of a different avenue. What parts of your identity do you feel closest to?
I love this question. I love it because it's the permission that you don't have to be, and you're not going to be everything all at once. And I think it's the permission to be fluid and almost let yourself, like, again, I'm very visual, like lean into different parts of yourself, and it doesn't diminish the other parts. It just means that in this season of life, I'm really leaning into this. So I love this question. I think it's so nice because, yeah. What am I leaning into right now? It's funny. I still am thinking about, so I'd say luminary still from the conversation we had during the seed. And I think because I'm really in a season of creating as well. So the creative in me is really heightened at the moment because I'm in the process of building selfhood. So that's been really lovely, leaning into those parts of me of like trying to build something from my brain and create spaces for other people to explore and research. I feel like the researcher in me is also really heightened. And I'd say I'm moving away. I'm not sure I've ever felt this disconnected from the version of me that I thought I should be. And the freedom that comes with that is so nice. And like being able to not really know what that means and not really know who this next version of me is, but knowing that I'm, through the work that we've been talking about, have been really starting to take some of those superimposed labels and layers off that I didn't actually choose. And then this like freedom that comes with being like, ooh, I'm excited to see where I go next if I keep practicing this kind of like kind intentionality with how I think about who I am and parts of me I choose to lean into.
I love this, and I can't wait to see what you create.
Thank you. I can't wait. I'm excited.
Yeah, you're just such a beautiful person. And again,
what about you? Sorry, I know you're the question asker today, but I'd love to know
the parts of my identity I'm leaning into right now.
Yeah.
I'm definitely in a season of of creativity as well. And the artist is always a very present one for me. I'm feeling a strong penchant towards the feminist part of me. I'm feeling connected to the part of my identity that is aging and what it means to be a woman who's, you know, in her like mid to late 30s. I'm sure some people watching are going to be like, aging, what are you talking about? And then others are going to be like, oh yeah, that's old. But society is just so funny about age. The other thing that I'm really leaning into right now is like the activist part of me.
Yeah. I feel that as well.
Yeah, I'm really thinking a lot about political systems, which is not something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. And I'm like, am I an anarchist? Is that? I'm just exploring what activism looks like for me in my life. So that's an important one.
Yeah.
Cindy, thank you so much for that, for this message. We're aligned. Yes, Lauren. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm glad you're here. So again, I can't wait to see what you create. And I would love to close on what you hope you'll inspire in the folks who you end up facilitating through this program. How do you hope your time together will leave them?
Wow. Honestly, I'm so inspired by the way that both Danny and yourself hold space. And there is such you feel so held, and there is such a permission to just show up as you are, to not be perfect, to be kind to yourself and others, to okay being wrong. And I think that from my own experience, that has been quite rare in conversations like this. I think it can feel quite scary, and it can feel quite like, oh my gosh, I can't say this wrong, or what if I say this wrong? And it doesn't feel like you're really in it together. And I think that's what I'd want to really create, is that space of safety. And again, I'm not saying that, I think it's more brave spaces that we're creating, but for people to feel invited to show up as themselves and feel okay getting things wrong, and okay learning and unlearning, and almost feel held enough to approach this work with softness and compassion, both to themselves and to the other people in our mini community. So yeah, I think it's just a real holding. I just want people to feel held and supported as they move through this really important work and this beautiful program that you two have both created. Honestly, it's just so amazing.
I appreciate that. I'm receiving all of this so much. And yeah, just thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful. Always is.
I really believe this is going to be such a fruitful journey for us all together as we continue to plant these seeds and as we stay in connection and community. I feel the net of support.
I love that. So do I.
Good. Okay, thank you for being here with me. Stay on. I'm going to press Drew. Love you so much.
Hi. Thank you for being here.
I'm going to press the end stream button, but stay on with me for...
I will.
Thank you, folks on LinkedIn. Love you, love you. Sending so much positive, supportive energy to the people watching, and Lauren, to you through the ether.
I feel it.
Thank you.